Admiral Kim Tae-ho gripped the metal railing of his command bridge as he watched the last rescue ships fly away from New Geneva Station. Through the thick glass windows, he could see thousands of alien faces pressed against the ship windows, looking back at what used to be their home. These weren't the proud warriors or wise diplomats he had met at peace talks years ago. These were broken survivors, the last of their kind. Dr. Park Min-ae walked up beside him, her tablet showing red warnings across every screen. Her voice was tired when she spoke. "The numbers are worse than we thought, Admiral. The Vexthak have taken 80% of all known space. Whole star systems just gone." Kim Tae-ho had seen the reports, but hearing it out loud made his stomach turn. The Vexthak weren't like any enemy humanity had ever faced. They didn't want territory or resources in the way other species understood them. They wanted everything. Every planet, every moon, every piece of technology, every living being. They ate it all and turned it into more of themselves. "Look at this," Park Min-ae said, showing him her tablet. The screen displayed what used to be the Altair system. Where there should have been 4 planets orbiting around a bright star, there was nothing but empty space and strange metal structures floating in the darkness. They didn't just destroy the planets. They took them apart piece by piece and used the materials to build their ships. The doctor pulled up another image. This one showed a Vexthak drone up close. It looked like someone had mixed a spider with a computer. Its body was made of dark metal and glowing circuits, but it moved like it was alive. These creatures were silicon-based, meaning they were like living computers instead of flesh and blood beings like humans. "They don't think like us," Park Min-ae continued. "Each drone is connected to all the others through some kind of network. They share thoughts instantly across entire galaxies. When one learns something, they all know it immediately." Kim Tae-ho watched another evacuation ship disappear into hyperspace. On board were the last survivors of the Zalani people, whose blue skin and forearms had once made them famous traders throughout the galaxy. Now, only 300 of them remained out of billions. Captain Lee Soo-jin's voice crackled through the communication system. "Admiral, we're getting reports from our outer scouts. Vexthak probe ships have been spotted near Europa and Ganymede. They're studying Jupiter's moons." The bridge went quiet. Everyone knew what this meant. The enemy had found Earth's solar system. After consuming most of the galaxy, they had finally arrived at humanity's doorstep. Kim Tae-ho thought about his daughter back on Earth. She was only 12 years old and loved to watch the stars through her bedroom telescope. Would she ever get the chance to see those stars up close? Or would the Vexthak take that future away from her like they had taken everything else? "How long do we have?" he asked Captain Lee. "Based on their movement patterns, maybe 6 months, before they reach the inner system. Maybe less." The Admiral looked around at his crew. These men and women had signed up to explore space and protect Earth's colonies. None of them had expected to be the last line of defense against creatures that ate entire worlds for breakfast. "Sir," said Communications Officer Yoon Hae-young, "we're receiving an emergency transmission from the Galactic Council. What's left of it, anyway." The main screen flickered to life, showing the face of Ambassador Kethvar, one of the few surviving council members. His normally proud expression looked defeated. "Admiral Kim, the council fleet has fallen. 70,000 ships destroyed in less than 3 hours. The Vexthak have a new weapon. They can turn our own technology against us somehow." Kim Tae-ho felt the weight of the galaxy settling on his shoulders. Earth was now the strongest military force left in known space, not because they had become more powerful, but because everyone else was gone. Back in Earth's emergency command center, General Park Se-jun was having the same terrible realization. The holographic map in front of him showed red zones spreading across the galaxy like blood and water. Each red zone represented billions of dead worlds. "We have 2 choices," he told the other military leaders. "We can load every ship we have with civilians and run toward the edge of the galaxy, hoping to find somewhere to hide. Or we can stay and fight." Defense Minister Cho Mi-ran spoke up. "If we run, we'll just be delaying the inevitable. The Vexthak will eventually find us wherever we go, and what kind of life would that be for our children? Always running, always afraid?" Dr. Park Min-ae had been studying the enemy for months now. She understood them better than anyone else, and what she understood terrified her. The Vexthak didn't just want to conquer the galaxy. They wanted to remake it entirely, turning every planet into a lifeless factory that produced more of themselves. But she had also noticed something interesting in their behavior patterns, something that might give humanity a chance. Captain Choi, Wubin stood in the cargo bay of what used to be a simple freight hauler called the Morning Star. 2 weeks ago, this ship was carrying grain between Earth's colonies. Now it looked like a floating weapons factory. His engineering team had ripped out the cargo containers and stuffed the empty spaces with every missile they could find. "Are you sure this will work?" asked engineer Kim Da-sam, looking nervously at the makeshift weapon systems they had built. "From spare parts and determination?" Choi Woo-bin smiled grimly. "The Vexthak expect us to fight like the other species did. Big ships, organized formations, following all the proper military rules. But we're not going to give them what they expect." Across the solar system, hundreds of similar conversions were taking place. Passenger ships became troop transports. Mining vessels turned into mobile bomb platforms. Even luxury yachts got fitted with weapons pulled from decommissioned military equipment. The alien refugees who had escaped to Earth's system watched in amazement as humans turned everything they could find into instruments of war. Lieutenant Han So-young was preparing for a mission that would have been considered suicide by any reasonable military standard. Her small squadron of modified fighters was planning to attack a Vexthak scouting force near Saturn's rings. The enemy ships were 3 times larger and infinitely more advanced, but Han So-young had something they didn't expect. "Remember," she told her pilots over the radio, "we're not trying to win a fair fight. We're trying to confuse them long enough to hurt them." Her plan was simple and completely insane. Instead of engaging the enemy ships directly, her fighters would hide in Saturn's ice rings and set off nuclear mines when the Vexthak came to investigate. The alien commanders who were still alive couldn't understand what humans were doing. Commander Vorth of the remaining Altarian fleet watched the tactical displays with confusion. "They're using cargo ships as warships," he said to his tactical officer. "They're sending small fighters against capital ships. This makes no strategic sense." But the results spoke for themselves. Human forces were inflicting damage on the Vexthak that nobody thought possible. The enemy's response patterns, which had been completely predictable when fighting other species, seemed to break down when facing human tactics. Major Yoon Jae-sung discovered this weakness by accident during a battle near Mars. His unit was supposed to retreat when they encountered a Vexthak command ship, but instead of following orders, he decided to attack. Not because he thought he could win, but because he was angry about losing his home colony and wanted to hurt the enemy before he died. "All units, ignore the escort ships," he radioed to his pilots. "Ram the command vessel directly." His tactical officer, Sergeant Lee Min-ho, thought his commander had lost his mind. "Sir, that's suicide. Our fighters can't penetrate their shields." "We're not trying to penetrate their shields," Yoon Jae-sung replied. "We're going to overwhelm their sensors. With so many targets, they won't know what to shoot first." The Vexthak command ship's artificial intelligence calculated the threat level of the approaching human fighters and determined they posed minimal danger. The small ships couldn't possibly damage its heavily armored hull. So instead of calling for backup or changing position, it simply waited for the humans to approach and prepared to destroy them with minimal effort. But Yoon Jae-sung's fighters didn't attack the way the Vexthak expected. Instead of forming neat attack formations, they came from every possible direction at once. Some flew in straight lines, others zigzagged randomly. A few pilots even flew their ships upside down just to be different. The Vexthak targeting systems, designed to predict logical attack patterns, couldn't keep up with the chaos. In the confusion, 3 human fighters managed to crash directly into the command ship's sensor array. The explosions didn't destroy the massive vessel, but they blinded it long enough for Yoon Jae-sung to guide a nuclear torpedo into its main engine. The command ship, which should have been able to destroy hundreds of human fighters without effort, found itself crippled and drifting. The Vexthak overmind processed this defeat with something resembling confusion. In its vast network of shared consciousness, every drone and ship was connected, sharing information instantaneously. This allowed them to coordinate attacks across entire star systems with perfect precision. But it also meant they all thought the same way. Humans, the Overmind realized, didn't share their thoughts with each other. Each human commander made decisions independently, often without consulting their allies or even their own tactical computers. This should have made them weaker, not stronger. Individual decision-making was inefficient and led to mistakes. Yet somehow these individual mistakes were causing massive problems for the swarm. When human commanders did unexpected things, the Vexthak couldn't predict or counter their actions quickly enough. The Overmind began dedicating more processing power to studying human behavior, trying to find patterns it could exploit. Dr. Park Minnie noticed this change in enemy behavior during her daily analysis reports. "They're learning about us," she told Admiral Kim Tae-ho, "but they're also getting frustrated. Look at these battle recordings. The Vexthak are starting to make mistakes they never made before." The Admiral studied the tactical displays. In 3 separate engagements, Vexthak formations had broken their own coordination, trying to respond to human unpredictability. Ships collided with each other, weapons fired at empty space, and entire squadrons flew into asteroid fields while chasing human fighters. They're so used to fighting enemies who think like them, Admiral Kim realized. Perfect coordination, logical decisions, predictable strategies. They don't know how to fight chaos. Word of human successes began spreading to the surviving alien populations. Species that had been preparing for extinction started watching the human war effort with growing hope. If these relatively primitive humans could hurt the Vexthak, maybe there was still a chance to fight back. But the war was far from over, and the real test was yet to come. Sergeant Kim Hye-jin floated in the airlock of her assault shuttle, checking her weapon one last time. Through the small window, she could see the massive Vexthak hive ship hanging in space like a metallic spider. The alien vessel was the size of a small city, covered in strange geometric patterns that seemed to shift and change as she watched. "This is insane," muttered Corporal Oh Sung-min beside her. "We're about to board a ship that could vaporize our entire fleet." Kim Hee-jin smiled behind her helmet visor. "That's exactly why it might work. They won't expect us to be stupid enough to try it." The hive ship had been damaged in the previous battle, its main engines offline and most of its escort fighters destroyed. But it still had thousands of Vexthak drones inside, all connected to each other through their shared consciousness. Any normal military force would have simply destroyed the crippled vessel from a safe distance. But Kim Hye-jin's team wasn't normal, and they weren't planning to fight fair. "Remember the plan," she told her squad over the radio. "We don't move. As a unit, everyone picks their own route through the ship. Don't coordinate with each other. Don't follow standard room-clearing procedures, just make it up as you go." Private Yoon Da-bin looked confused. "Sergeant, that goes against everything we learned in training." "Exactly," Kim Hye-jin replied. "The Vexthak have been studying how other species fight. They know all the proper military tactics, but they've never seen humans who deliberately ignore their own training." The assault shuttle's magnetic clamps attached to the hive ship's hull. With a loud clang, Kim Hye-jin's team cut through the alien metal using plasma torches, creating their own entrance instead of looking for existing doors. The first thing that hit them when they entered the ship was the smell, a strange mix of ozone and burning. Circuits. Inside, the hive ship looked like the inside of a computer that had grown into a building. Glowing cables ran along the walls like veins, and the corridors branched off in seemingly random directions. Everything hummed with electrical energy. The Vexthak defenders were waiting for them, but not in the way Kim Hee-jin expected. Instead of setting up defensive positions or patrolling in organized groups, the alien drones seemed confused about where to go. Their shared consciousness told them that human boarding parties would advance in standard military formations, clearing rooms systematically and maintaining communication between units. But Kim Hye-jin's team scattered in all directions the moment they entered the ship. Private Lee Jinna went left down a corridor that looked completely unimportant. Corporal Park Hyun-woo climbed up through a maintenance shaft that shouldn't have led anywhere useful. Kim Hee-jin herself headed straight for what looked like the most dangerous part of the ship, simply because no sane person would go there. The Vexthak drones tried to coordinate their response, but their shared intelligence kept receiving contradictory information. One group of drones moved to intercept Li Jinna, but by the time they reached her last known position, she had already moved somewhere else entirely. Another group prepared to defend what they calculated was the humans' primary objective, only to find that none of the human soldiers were heading in that direction. "This doesn't make sense," Kim Hee-jin heard one of her team members say over the radio. "I'm in what looks like their main computer core, but there's nobody guarding it." "That's because they're all trying to figure out where we're supposed to be," Kim Hye-jin replied, planting explosive charges on what looked like an important power conduit. The breakthrough came when Corporal Oh Sung-min accidentally discovered the ship's central processing unit while trying to find a bathroom. The massive chamber contained thousands of glowing crystals that pulsed with synchronized light, the physical manifestation of the hive ship's shared consciousness. "Sergeant, you need to see this," he radioed. "I think I found their brain." Instead of calling for backup or coordinating a proper assault on the critical system, Oh Sung-min did something that horrified military tacticians, but perfectly demonstrated human unpredictability. He started smashing the crystals with his rifle, but one by one while singing an old Korean folk song his grandmother had taught him. The effect on the Vexthak was immediate and devastating. As their central processing unit took damage, the drones throughout the ship began moving erratically. Some froze in place, others spun in circles, and a few started attacking each other by mistake. Back on Earth, Dr. Nam Gi-tae was having the time of his life. The captured Vexthak technology that Kim Hee-jin's team had brought back was unlike anything humanity had ever encountered. The alien devices seemed to be grown rather than built, with organic-looking circuits that could repair themselves and adapt to new situations. "Look at this," he said excitedly to his research assistant, pointing at a Vexthak weapon they had disassembled. "The power source adjusts its output based on the target. It's like the gun thinks about what it's shooting." But Dr. Nam had an idea that the original creators never intended. Instead of trying to understand how the weapon was supposed to work, he began modifying it to work differently. He rewired the targeting system to respond to human brainwaves instead of Vexthak thought patterns. He changed the power source to draw energy from human emotions rather than cold logic. The result was a weapon that worked better for humans than it ever had for the Vexthak. More importantly, it gave Dr. Nam insights into how the enemy's technology could be turned against them. Colonel Park Si-jun was facing a different challenge. The surviving alien species who had joined the resistance were used to fighting in organized, disciplined formations. Their military traditions went back thousands of years and emphasized coordination, planning, and logical decision-making. "You want us to do what?" asked Commander Zethkol of the Centaurian Navy, his four eyes blinking in disbelief. "I want you to forget everything you know about proper military tactics," Colonel Park replied patiently. "When you see the enemy, don't do what you're trained to do. Do something unexpected." The alien commanders looked at each other uncertainly. To them, this sounded like madness. But they had also seen the battle reports. Human forces were achieving victories that should have been impossible, while traditional military approaches continued to fail against the Vexthak. Slowly, reluctantly, the alien commanders began learning human-style warfare. They practiced making decisions without consulting their tactical computers. They learned to break formation deliberately and attack from unexpected angles. Most importantly, they began to understand that sometimes the best strategy was to have no strategy at all. The psychological impact of these victories spread throughout what remained of galactic civilization. Species that had been preparing for extinction suddenly had hope again. The Vexthak, who had seemed unstoppable, were being defeated by creatures they had dismissed as primitive savages. But the humans weren't savages. They were something far more dangerous to the Vexthak's way of thinking. They were individuals who refused to be predictable, fighters who turned their own weaknesses into strengths, and survivors who got more dangerous the more desperate their situation became. The war was beginning to change, and for the first time since the Vexthak invasion began, the galaxy had reason to believe it might survive. General Lee Min-ho stood in front of the holographic display showing the Kepler 442 system, where millions of alien civilians were trapped on 3 different planets. The Vexthak had turned the system into a massive processing center, slowly consuming everything organic and converting it into more of their mechanical drones. "Sir, the enemy has 47 capital ships defending that system," reported his tactical officer, Major Kim Soo-young. "Our entire fleet only has 12 ships, and most of them are converted civilian vessels." Lee Min-ho studied the display, paying special attention to the system's central star. Like many older stars, Kepler 442 was showing signs of instability. Solar flares had been increasing over the past few months, and the star's electromagnetic field was fluctuating in dangerous ways. "What if we don't try to fight their ships?" he said quietly. "Sir, the Vexthak are machines, right? They depend on electronic systems for everything. What happens to machines when they get hit by a massive electromagnetic pulse?" Major Kim looked at the star data, and her eyes widened. "You want to trigger a solar flare deliberately?" "General, that could destroy everything in the system, including the people we're trying to save." Lee Min-ho nodded grimly. "It's a risk, but if we do nothing, those people are dead anyway. At least this way, they have a chance." The plan was incredibly dangerous and required perfect timing. Human ships would need to get close enough to the star to plant special devices that would destabilize its magnetic field. The resulting solar flare would disable every electronic system in the solar system, including the Vexthak ships. But it would also give the humans only a few hours to evacuate the trapped civilians before their own ship's electronics came back online. "It's insane," said Commander Songdabin when she heard the plan. "I love it." Songdabin had been developing her own unconventional tactics. Her fleet consisted mostly of old cargo ships and mining vessels that had been hastily converted for military use. They couldn't match Vexthak ships in firepower or speed, but Songdabin had discovered they could be used in ways the enemy never expected. "We're not going to fight them ship to ship," she told her captains. "We're going to turn our ships into guided missiles." The concept was simple, but required incredible courage. Human ships would accelerate toward Vexthak vessels at maximum speed, with their crews staying aboard until the last possible moment before ejecting in escape pods. The ships would then crash directly into the enemy vessels, causing massive damage through sheer kinetic force. "The Vexthak have energy shields that can stop weapons fire," Songdabin explained. "But they're not designed to stop an entire ship moving at high speed. Their computers calculate that no rational enemy would sacrifice valuable vessels in suicide attacks." The first test of this ramming tactic came during the approach to Kepler 442. A group of Vexthak patrol ships moved to intercept the human fleet, expecting a conventional battle. Instead, they found themselves facing cargo ships that were accelerating directly toward them. The Vexthak ships' targeting computers couldn't understand what they were seeing. The human vessels weren't trying to achieve optimal firing positions or maintain safe distances. They were just charging forward, like ancient cavalry, completely ignoring their own safety. "Abandon ship," Captain Lim Hae-jin shouted as his converted freighter bore down on a Vexthak cruiser. He and his crew ejected in escape pods just seconds before their ship slammed into the alien vessel's hull. The impact cracked the cruiser's armor and sent it spinning out of control. Meanwhile, the operation to destabilize Kepler 442's star was proceeding according to plan. Lieutenant Park Ji-won piloted a small scout ship directly into the star's corona, the superheated gas surrounding the stellar surface. The radiation should have killed him instantly, but his ship's modified shields held just long enough for him to plant the electromagnetic pulse devices. "Devices planted," he reported over the radio, his voice distorted by interference. "Solar flare will trigger in approximately 6 hours. The next phase required human marines to land on the occupied planets and fight the Vexthak drones hand-to-hand while the evacuation took place. These marines didn't have the advanced powered armor or energy weapons that other species used. Instead, they had developed fighting techniques that turned the aliens' technological superiority against them. Sergeant Cho Min-jun led his squad through the ruins of what used to be the colony of New Busan. The Vexthak drones they encountered were each individually stronger, faster, and better armed than any human soldier. But they had a critical weakness that Cho Min-jun had learned to exploit. "They're networked," he explained to his new recruits. "Every drone shares information with every other drone instantly. That makes them incredibly coordinated, but it also means they all react the same way to the same stimulus. His technique was brutally simple. When a Vexthak drone aimed its weapon at him, Cho Min-jun would dive toward it instead of away from it. The drone's programming expected enemies to seek cover or retreat when fired upon. It wasn't prepared for someone to get closer to danger instead of farther away. In the split second of confusion that followed, Cho Min-jun would attach an explosive charge to the drone's central processing unit. The explosion would not only destroy that drone but send confusing signals through the network to other nearby drones. It's like fighting a computer that's trying to run a program it's never seen before, explained Corporal Ansora as she demonstrated the technique to a group of alien volunteers. The key is to never do what the computer expects you to do. The solar flare erupted right on schedule, sending a massive wave of electromagnetic energy throughout the Kepler 442 system. Every Vexthak ship went dead in space, their electronic systems fried by the radiation. But the humans had been prepared. Their ship's electronics were protected by specially designed shielding, and they had backup systems that could function in high radiation environments. The evacuation proceeded smoothly, with human ships ferrying millions of alien civilians to safety, while the Vexthak fleet drifted helplessly. It was the first time anyone had successfully liberated an entire star system from the swarm. But the real psychological victory came at Proxima Base, where Captain Jang Yu-na faced an impossible situation. Her small defense force was protecting a research station that contained critical intelligence about Vexthak technology. The enemy sent a massive assault force to recapture it. "We're outnumbered 50-1, reported her tactical officer. Captain Jang smiled. "Good. That means they'll underestimate us." What followed became known as the Proxima Miracle. Using every unconventional tactic humans had developed, Jang Yu-na's tiny force held off the Vexthak assault for 3 days. They used ramming attacks, electromagnetic pulse weapons, close combat techniques, and pure human stubbornness to defeat an enemy that should have overwhelmed them in minutes. The victory at Proxima Base sent shockwaves throughout the galaxy. If a small human force could defeat such overwhelming odds, what could a larger human army accomplish? Species that had been hiding in the outer rim began joining the resistance, adopting human tactics and learning to fight with desperate creativity instead of rigid military doctrine. For the first time since the war began, the Vexthak were no longer the hunters. They had become the hunted. Admiral Kim Tae-ho stared at the massive planet hanging in space before his fleet. This was it, the Vexthak homeworld, where their overmind controlled trillions of drones across the galaxy. The planet's surface was covered in gleaming metal structures that pulsed with electrical energy, like a giant mechanical brain floating in the darkness. "Sir, we're detecting over 2,000 defense platforms around the planet," reported Communications Officer Yoon Hae-young. "Each one is the size of a battleship, and that's just what we can see on the surface." Kim Tae-ho nodded slowly. His fleet consisted of barely 300 ships, most of them converted civilian vessels held together with spare parts and determination. By any logical calculation, they were about to attempt the impossible. But logic hadn't won them the war so far. "Dr. Park, are you certain about your theory?" he asked. Dr. Park Min-ae looked up from her research tablet, exhaustion clear on her face. She had been studying captured Vexthak technology for months, trying to understand how their collective consciousness worked. The network that connects all the drones is incredibly sophisticated, but it has one critical flaw. It can't process truly individual thoughts. She brought up a holographic display showing the structure of the Vexthak network. Every drone is connected to every other drone. They share memories, experiences, and decision-making processes instantly. It makes them incredibly efficient, but it also means they all think exactly the same way. "And if we introduce something that thinks differently?" Kim Tae-ho asked. "The network would try to integrate it, but individual human consciousness is like a computer virus to their system. It doesn't follow their logical patterns. If we could get human minds directly connected to their network, it might cause the whole system to crash." The plan they had developed was horrifying in its simplicity. Human volunteers would allow themselves to be partially assimilated by the Vexthak, becoming part of their network, while somehow maintaining their individual humanity. It was a one-way trip with no guarantee of success. Pilot Oh Sung-min raised his hand when Admiral Kim asked for volunteers. He was 23 years old and had joined the military to see the galaxy. Now he was volunteering to sacrifice his humanity to save it. Why? Kim Tae-ho asked him privately. Oh Sung-min looked out at the stars through the ship's viewport. My little sister is back on Earth, Admiral. She's only 8 years old. If we fail here, she'll never get the chance to see these stars the way I have. That's worth any price. Across the fleet, 200 other volunteers stepped forward. They were pilots, engineers, Marines, and ordinary crew members who had decided that some things were more important than their own survival. Each of them knew they would likely die, but they also knew their sacrifice might give everyone else a chance to live. The battle began with the largest ramming attack in human history. Captain Lee Soo-jin led the first wave, her converted cargo ship accelerating toward the planet's defensive grid at maximum speed. Behind her, dozens of other ships followed, their crews staying aboard until the last possible moment. This is Captain Lee to all ships, she broadcast as her vessel approached the first defense platform. Remember why we're here. We're not dying. Today, we're choosing to be free. Her ship struck the defense platform with the force of a small asteroid. The explosion lit up space like a new star, and the platform's destruction sent feedback through the Vexthak network. For just a moment, every drone in the system hesitated as their collective consciousness processed the unexpected assault. That moment was all Admiral Kim needed. Launch the infiltration pods, he ordered. 50 small pods shot toward the planet's surface, each carrying a human volunteer who would attempt to interface directly with the Vexthak network. The pods were designed to look like debris from the ramming attacks, allowing them to slip through the defensive grid while the enemy was focused on the larger battle. Oh Sung-min's pod crashed into the surface near what appeared to be a major network hub. The mechanical structures around him were alive with activity, as Vexthak drones swarmed to repair the damage from the orbital bombardment. He knew he had only minutes before they discovered him. The assimilation process was more horrible than anything he had imagined. Metal tendrils emerged from the ground and wrapped around his body, injecting nanomachines into his bloodstream. He could feel his thoughts being pulled into the vast network of the overmind, his individual consciousness being absorbed into something infinitely larger. But instead of losing himself, Oh Sung-min held on to one simple memory: his sister's laugh when he taught her to fly a kite. It was such a small human thing, but it was completely his own. No machine could understand the joy he felt when she smiled, or the way her happiness made him happy in return. The Vexthak network tried to process this memory and found it incomprehensible. Why would one individual's happiness depend on another individual's happiness? It made no logical sense. The emotion served no practical purpose. Yet it was so central to Oh Sung-min's identity that the network couldn't ignore it. Across the planet, other human volunteers were having similar effects. Sergeant Kim Do-won held on to the memory of his mother's cooking. Private Yoo Min-jung focused on the feeling of rain on her face during Earth's monsoon season. Each individual memory was like a glitch in the perfect logic of the overmind. Dr. Park Min-ae watched from the flagship as her instruments detected massive disruptions in the Vexthak network. It's working, she breathed. The network is trying to integrate human consciousness, but it can't process individual emotions and memories. The effect spread like wildfire through the collective. Drones across the galaxy began behaving erratically, as the overmind struggled to cope with incompatible thought patterns. Some froze in place, others began moving in random directions. The perfect coordination that had made the swarm so deadly was breaking down. On the planet's surface, Oh Sung-min felt the network beginning to fragment around him. Through his connection to the overmind, he could sense the confusion and something that might have been fear spreading through billions of drones. The collective consciousness was experiencing individual emotions for the first time, and it was tearing itself apart. "Tell my sister I kept my promise," he whispered, not knowing if anyone could hear him. Above the planet, Admiral Kim watched as the Vexthak defense platforms began shutting down one by one. The massive fleets that had conquered most of the galaxy were drifting aimlessly as their coordination networks failed. For the first time in the war, the enemy seemed vulnerable. "All ships, begin the final assault," he ordered. But the assault wasn't needed. The Vexthak overmind, overwhelmed by the introduction of true individual consciousness, was collapsing under its own weight. Across the galaxy, the great swarm that had consumed worlds and civilizations simply stopped functioning. The volunteers who had allowed themselves to be assimilated didn't survive the network's collapse. Their sacrifice had introduced something the Vexthak couldn't understand or control: the messy, illogical, beautiful chaos of individual human consciousness. In the end, the galaxy was saved not by superior weapons or brilliant tactics, but by the simple human refusal to give up hope. The war was won by ordinary people who chose to sacrifice everything for the freedom of others, proving that some things are worth more than survival itself. The Vexthak had conquered the galaxy through perfect logic and flawless coordination. They were defeated by laughter, tears, memories of home, and the unshakable human belief that individual lives matter. It was a victory that no military strategist could have planned, achieved by people who refused to accept that defeat was inevitable. The war was over and the galaxy belonged to the living once again.